Welcome to Tabletop Gaming Guild. Today I'll be looking at my top 100 of all times. Now I've recently done my top 10 and I thought I'd backtrack because I noticed in making that top 10 that my full list of, I did ranked about 300 some games, had some really interesting games around the 100 level. So there was actually quite a number of games near the 100 level that at one point had either been in or been in consideration for my top 10. So there are some amazing games. That being said, my number 100 is one of those amazing games that many people would have definitely considered for their top 10. And if I hadn't had so many great games I've played, this would definitely be a factor. And that's Pandemic Legacy Season 0. In the Pandemic series, you're trying to fight a plague, and it's a legacy, so you're going to be tearing things up, things are going to be changing, you're going from season to season, trying to survive as a team. In this particular iteration, it is using kind of a spy mechanic, so you're going to be infiltrating enemy bases, gathering intel, and playing the game in a very enjoyable manner. It's a great game. My number 99 is a light card shedding game called Six Nimmt. Now this goes by many names. This is a German language version, the one that I happen to have. And they're all basically the same. The core concept being you're going to have a hand of cards and you're going to secretly choose a card. And then everybody's going to reveal, and you have to play those cards from lowest to highest, so the person who plays the lowest card gets to place first, and they have to place in one of 4 sets. The rule for placing this set is you have to be placing a number that's higher than the previous card in that set, but you have to be placing also in the set that your number is nearest to that you can legally place in. The key, though, is if you ever place a card that has no legal placement, you end up taking cards instead. Or if you ever are forced to place a card and make 6 in a set, you end up taking cards. And taking cards means negative points. It's a really fun, quick, easy to learn. It takes about 1-2 minutes to learn this game. And you can just play it back to back to back to back. You know, I've never played this game where I didn't play it at least 5-6 times. My number 98 was at one time in my top 10. It's still a phenomenal game. I still absolutely love it. I just find it hard for me to get to the table for 2 reasons. One, I don't play a lot of 2-player games, and also it's a rather intimidating rule set. Then it's Twilight Struggle. Now, Twilight Struggle is Cold War era card game that is going to be all about constantly shifting power. So you're playing cards that either can be good for you or good for your opponent, so you can use it for action points, or you can do the action on the card, and you're trying to make sure you're using the cards that are best for you for their actions, but also making sure the opponent doesn't get to use those. Overall, it's a very intense game. You're constantly worried about what the next card's going to do and how it's going to swing, because you know who's in the lead can swing drastically from turn to turn. It's one of those games that you are going to be stressed, and at the end you're going to be tired, but you're going to feel good about that. You're going to feel accomplished that you've done something meaningful at the end of this game. Really fun game. I just wish I could get to the table more. Now, I did recently download the digital version of this game, so I'm hoping that helps me get it played a lot more and shoots it up my list. My number 97 is the second iteration of a game that is also going to be higher on my list. They are very similar games, but they're just different enough that I do feel okay with having it on my list twice. Now, this game is Yellow and Yancey. The original great game of this is Tigris and Euphrates, and they do roughly the same thing. It's an abstract strategy game where you're going to be placing tiles of different colors, and you get points in each color as you place tiles. If ever leaders get connected, you start combat, and combat can mean leaders being wiped off the board or huge swaths of tiles being wiped off the board. And this is typical Reiner Knizia in that the lowest number of a color you have is the color that scores. So it doesn't matter if you have 37 blue. If you only have 5 red, your end game points is 5. The big thing of this is in Yellow Yancey's, they kind of tamed it down a little bit, and a lot of people do prefer it because of that. Where in Tigers and Euphrates, it can be quite swingy. You have giant swaths of the board that can be wiped out really quickly, and then almost immediately it happens again. And the really nastiness of the Tigers Euphrates definitely dulled a little bit in Yellow Yancey in exchange for more thoughtful strategy, which is great. But you know, I played Tigers and Euphrates for so long before trying this. You know, it was just didn't feel right switching over. And we're following with another abstract strategy game, which is War Chest. Now, War Chest is a chess-like game where you have all these really nice chips. So you're going to be throwing these chips in a bag. Start with a certain number of chips of each faction, and when you draw a chip from the bag, you can either place it on the board to deploy new units, you can use it to bolster an existing unit, you can use it to take an action, or you can use it to help you recruit more units. The key thing though that makes it really interesting is if you're placing it on the board, you're never getting that back. So using it to take actions, you're eventually going to get back in your bag and get to play it again. So the more units you have on the board of a specific type, or the stronger you make your units, the less actions you have potentially to take with those units. Really cool. And as you can see, there's quite a few different types of units and a bunch of cards that tell you what each unit does. And you're not going to be playing with every unit in each game. You're just going to be picking a few, so it's mix and match, and there's a lot of variability in this game. Really phenomenal abstract strategy game. Next one is a classic. My number 95 is the grandfather of all deck building games. So that was a huge hit when it first came out, and I loved it then. I still really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite games, obviously, since it's in my top 100, and that's Dominion. In Dominion, you are going to be buying cards from a set tableau that everybody has access to. There's going to be 10 cards available, and you're going to be using those cards to power up your deck. And the key to this game, though, is figuring out when to stop buying cards and powering up your deck, and when to start buying estates and provinces, and basically the point scoring cards that you need to win the game, but they're going to end up cluttering your hand if you buy them too early. And my number 94, though, is one that unless you watch our show on a regular basis, you probably have never heard of. It's a game called Ming. Now, this was another game that was at one point on my top 10. I believe it was just for the first year that I was really into gaming and starting this show. Ming is basically an attempt to take Mahjong and make it more approachable, more family friendly, and it can be quite fun and fast without having to rely on gambling to get the entertainment value. Now, it is a small card game, but it is very complex because there's only a small list of ways you can actually score points, and you have to memorize that list, so it can be quite difficult to get to the table for something so small. I realized a lot of my love of this game is based on my history with it. It's so connected to my family. I basically grew up playing this game, and I have a lot of nostalgia for it. It's still a phenomenal game, but I believe this is where it should be. One of the best trick-taking games is Skull King. Now, Skull King takes the concept from a game called Oh Hell, or sometimes called Oh Heck, where you have a deck of cards that you can play as basic trick taking, but it has trumps and super trumps, and you're not playing with the whole deck. You're going to be taking some of the cards out of the game before you start. And then there's also some modules you can throw in to add other variability, like one card that just makes a trip null and void. And you're basically betting on how many tricks you're going to win in this game, with only partial information, because you don't know what cards aren't in the deck, and a lot of your strategy is going to be based on what you think isn't available. So you're going to be watching how people play, trying to think what they do have and what's out of the game based on how they're playing. So my next game, number 92, may upset some people that it's this low, but I remind you, these are still phenomenal games. Many of these have been in my top 10 before. There's just so many great games I played, and every year there's so many more great games I get to play. But this is a relatively new one that many people have rated very highly, and that's Lost Ruins of Arnak. This is a worker placement game and a little bit of a deck builder. I do like both of those mechanics very much. They're both some of my favorite mechanics, and this one does it really well, exploring and fighting monsters and going up tracks of discovery. Super popular, but it is currently my 92. And my 91 is another one there's a good chance you've never heard of, because it came out at a time where IP games were generally considered pretty bad. They tended to be more slapped together, low quality games that the theme came first, the mechanics came later. But this one, I think, did it really well. It's BioShock Infinite. So this is a pretty unique area control game. Relatively straightforward as far as that, but what's really cool is because of the, I believe they call them sky rails that you can use to travel around. They have really cool ways of surprising your opponent by appearing places where they didn't think you could be, and maneuvering your troops and just trying to outmaneuver your enemy. And it's really clever, really fun, plays well with 2, but can easily play with 3 or 4. So that's my 91 through 100. All phenomenal games. I'm sure you've heard of some of them. Some of you probably never heard of. Hopefully that's gonna pique your interest, and you'll join me again for number 81 through 90. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to check us out on other social media such as Instagram and Facebook, and don't forget to like and subscribe.